had to hop back on the jams. Give us one moment to put together our cameras here. Alrighty. So, hi everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Cooking Connected. It's been a little bit of a break. We had a little break there, but we are back and better than ever. So, if this is your first time with us, welcome. We're excited to have you here. My name is Sajwa, and I'm here today with Jordan.
Hi, everyone.
Both Jordan and I are Cooking Matters program coordinators with the University of Minnesota Extension. So, a normal Cooking Matters class is a 6-week nutrition-based cooking class, and we meet once a week for 2 hours. Classes feature a nutrition educator and a chef, and they work together to go through a recipe, teach participants nutrition, and how to make delicious, healthy, and affordable meals. Today, I will be our nutrition educator, and Jordan will be our chef. So, following the same format, we're just going to do that virtually. We're going to be doing a turkey soup. I did put the link to the recipe in the description of this video, as well as in the live chat, but I can repopulate that again for you all. We want to thank the creator of today's recipe, Sabrina Snyder, with dinnerthendessert.com. So check that out for more recipes for them. And thank you, Sabrina, for this yummy recipe. Just like every week, we do have a survey. We love hearing from our viewers. We appreciate your feedback. So we just want to ask you guys to take our survey for us. That's also going to be posted in the description box and below in the live chat. To do the survey, you are going to need a survey code. So I've got that here. Our program code for this week's episode of Cooking Connected is E0985561. And again, that's our program code for this week's episode of Cooking Connected. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jordan, and we're going to get started with today's recipe.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so excited to be back with you guys today. So as Sajwa was saying, we are going to be making a turkey soup. So unfortunately, my turkey bones did not make it from the holiday. So I'm going to be making a chicken noodle soup. But if you were smarter than I was and threw your turkey bones in the freezer, you can use the turkey bones that you had from over the holidays. If you made a turkey, or if you make a turkey in the future, you can use those bones to make soup. But you can also use chicken as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Of course, the first thing that you always do before we get started is wash your hands. So we're going to be washing our hands for 20 seconds, singing the ABCs twice, happy birthday once if you're working with the kiddos, with hot soapy water, making sure we're getting all those surfaces. The next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and wash and sanitize your station. All of your countertops are clean and ready to go. I am working with the chicken today. You may be working with the turkey. So we are working with meat and vegetables. It's always a good idea to keep things clean. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and set up our mise en place. So we've talked about mise en place quite a bit in the past. It's having your mess in place is what we like to joke about at Cooking Matters, but getting everything together. So this is kind of a new recipe for me. I've had it a lot, I guess, with over the years. My grandmother used to make turkey noodle soup is what she used to call it. So this is kind of a fun recipe for me to finally make. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to change my view so you guys can. So as you can see, I've got my mise en place here. I've got everything set out and ready to go. So the first step of this recipe is actually to go ahead and you're going to take 8 cups of chicken broth. And I used, I wasn't able to use homemade, but if you are able to use homemade, that's always a great option. We do have a video on how to make chicken broth and vegetable broth. So check that out on YouTube if you don't know how to make, vegetable broth with scraps. And this soup would just be absolutely phenomenal with homemade broth as well. Yeah. But unfortunately, I did not have my homemade broth together, so I'm using this today. I just 8 cups here. And then I took the carcass of my chicken that I roasted a chicken and cut off all of the meat and then just took those bones and threw it in here. So this has actually been simmering for a couple hours. It's a little heavy, but I'll try to show you guys what I'm doing here. So I'm just letting this simmer in the stock pot, and it says for about 30 minutes on the recipe. If you can do it for longer, that's great. You know, you get more flavor out of everything. So everything's just kind of melding together there. And you can see my bones. I've got some chicken meat still in there and some other spices as well. That was actually from roasting my chicken. So that was kind of nice to have ready together. So this has been roasting, I think for me, about an hour. Like I said, if you're in a hurry, you can do it for about a half hour. Or otherwise you can go longer. So that's the beauty of this. For those of you who did create a beautiful meal over this last week with a turkey, this is a great meal because you can use the leftovers for something different. So if you're sick of turkey, you can have turkey noodle soup, and we're utilizing those leftovers. We're saving a little money. So this is a great recipe for that.
And also, don't forget, you guys, you can be adding those scraps from that delicious meal you prepared earlier and saving those as well in your broth bag. So that meal can really stretch past the one day.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our vegetables. So we're going to be working with carrots, onions, and celery today. You can add other vegetables, of course, as well. I've adapted this recipe, as you can see, and so can you, for your tastes and what you prefer. So my vegetables have already been rinsed as part of my mise en place, and we're just going to go ahead and get started cutting them. So reviewing our knife skills again, it's been a couple weeks.
Been a while.
So we're going to go ahead and pinch our blade and then wrap our fingers around. And again, this is just the proper way to hold a knife. It's a little bit safer, a little bit more power. And then, of course, if things are rolling around, we're going to be using our claw to hold items. So like our onion here is rolling around on us. We're going to use our claw to hold it in place and make sure that we don't cut our fingertips. So while we have it here, let's start with our onion. I'm going to go ahead. I like to chop off this pointy part first. And then this fuzzy part, I just chop a little bit of this off because this is holding the onion together. So just a tiny little portion of that, cut that off. And of course, these are great scraps for broth in the future. If you're making chicken noodle soup or turkey noodle soup in the future, you can save that and make your own broth. So I'm going to be using the full onion today. We'll go ahead and peel this paper off, and you can save that for your broth bag as well. If you don't like onions, you can leave them out, definitely. It does add a lot of really nice flavor to the soup. So I'd encourage you to try a little bit, but you can definitely cut back if you do not like onions very much. So I'm going to create a little bit of a dice. The first thing I'm going to do, just to make it a little smaller, is I'm going to rest my hand on the top here, and then I'm just going to slice this way with my onion. And this just creates a smaller dice. We're not going to cut all the way through our onion, keeping in mind that that root portion is what's holding our onion together. Then we're going to use these nice little lines that our onion naturally has, and we're just going to go ahead and cut down.
While you're working on that onion there, Jordan, I just have a quick question. Does it matter what kind of onions we're using? Like, could I use a red one or white or yellow?
So there is a bit of a difference in flavor between onions. Yellow and white onions, I think, in my opinion, are a little bit more mild. Red onions tend to have a lot more flavor. That's not saying that you can't use them. If you prefer that, I would definitely encourage you to use a red onion. But for this recipe, I would like, for myself and my family, a little bit more of a mild flavor. So I'm going to go with a white or a yellow onion. But again, use what you have on hand. If I had a red onion on hand, I'd probably do it. So use what you have in your cabinets and what you prefer, of course. We've got this nice dice here. I'm making mine a little bit smaller. You can make yours a little bit bigger depending on how you like it. But I'm going to kind of want this to meld into my soup a little bit and give me a little bit more of that onion flavor. So we're adding a lot of onions today. Another great addition to this recipe would actually be garlic. The recipe does not include garlic. But you can definitely add that if you'd like, if you prefer garlic.
Mhm.
So when I was roasting my chicken, I actually used a garlic and rosemary kind of rub on top when I was roasting it. So I naturally have some garlic already kind of thrown in there. So
Yeah, one thing to note about Jordan's technique here, I just want you guys to notice that when she gets to the end, she does continue to chop, even kind of around maybe that fuzzy part that she mentioned, trying to get the most of that actual onion, the actual vegetable. Although it's nice to have scraps in our scrap bag, they're supposed to be scraps. So you don't want to be throwing, the majority of your onion in there. You do want to try to incorporate as much as you can in the actual recipe.
absolutely, we don't want to waste that.
You paid for that.
So it's really important, of course, as always, we're chopping quite a few vegetables today. To clear your cutting boards. If you have too much on your cutting board, a lot of times you get crowded, and sometimes I do this sometimes, my entire cutting board will be crowded, and then I just have this little corner to work with. So it's always a really good idea to just kind of go ahead and clear it. Takes a little bit more time, but that's okay. It's safer that way.
Yeah.
I always end up cutting myself if I'm just working in this tiny corner because I'm not really paying attention to what I'm cutting. I'm paying attention to the space I have.
Great point.
So next, the recipe calls for 4 ribs of celery here. And I had them kind of cut up already, but these have been rinsed. When I'm working with celery, I like to take the top and bottom off, so these kind of whiter pieces.
Mhm.
They might be a little bit more dense, but not too bad. I'm not a huge fan of celery, to be honest with you. If I were making this on a normal day, I might include maybe 1 or 2 ribs of celery. But if you don't like celery, don't include it. We just had it on hand, so I just figured why not.
Yeah, another tip, I mean, also if you're not a big celery fan, you could try cutting it up smaller. Whether that's instead of like kind of those C shapes, you could do a dice, mix and match shapes out of that celery, dice that up. Or you could try a little mincing and see how that works for you. So you can get kind of the flavor without so much of the vegetable being noticed.
Absolutely. All right. It's working through our celery here. Can anybody think of any other vegetables? Usually I stick kind of close to these more traditional vegetables in my soups, but I'd love to try new ones. If anybody has any ideas for me, that would be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna pop that into the chat for everyone. No, for myself, I would definitely consider mushrooms if I had them on hand. I think
Ooh,
that night adds a nice earthy layer of flavor. And that's how soups work. You're layering those flavors in there. So I think mushrooms would be really nice.
yeah.
You could get creative. I could see something like broccoli. You can kind of chop that up.
There you go.
You can really, a soup is really open to anything. And I actually wanted to talk about that. I will talk about that when Jordan has a little bit more free time. Just let me know.
Okay. We're going to be simmering our soup for a while here, so we definitely got quite a bit of time for nutrition today.
Okay.
And you can definitely use some frozen vegetables. If you think of some frozen vegetables that you want to add, soups are kind of nice. They're already really moist, so that extra moisture from the frozen vegetables isn't going to hurt it too much. If you have a lot of frozen vegetables in there, that moisture may come out quite a bit, so you might have to season it a little bit more, but if you have it on hand, I would definitely encourage using it. So with our carrots, I had a giant carrot, so I'm going to go ahead. I cut this in half. If you have kiddos in the kitchen that maybe want to help, they can go ahead and peel this. If you like peeling it, I prefer not to peel it because you are wasting some of that carrot. And you're getting more fiber as well. So if you don't want to peel it, don't. It's not necessary as long as you've rinsed your vegetables.
Yeah.
But it is important when we're cutting our carrots today for a soup that we're cutting them all the same size. We don't want a huge chunk of carrot and then a teeny tiny chunk of carrot because then you will get one really hard piece of carrot in your soup and then one really soft piece of carrot in your soup. So I'm going to do my best to try to cut these all the same size today. But the best part about soups is you can kind of let them simmer for a little while. So if you do end up cutting them a little big, we'll just leave it on the burner a little bit longer.
You know, your tip there about cutting your vegetables about the same size. It goes beyond just soups, you know, that works for if you're roasting, sauteing, anything like that. Especially with a more dense vegetable like a carrot, you are going to want to make sure that it can cook evenly and all the pieces are about the same. That really helps with cooking and cooking time.
Yeah. Especially when we're thinking about, I always like to think about stir fries. Sometimes when you're cooking a stir fry, you'll throw in your denser vegetables first, but it's still really important to go ahead and cut them all the same size. So we'll just quickly work through these. I've got a lot of carrot today. We love carrots in my house. I just recently learned that you can actually freeze carrots for soups like this. I used to think that you aren't able to because when you thaw them, they get a little mushy. But my mother-in-law told me that you can freeze them, so I'm giving that a try. We had a garden this year, so I froze some of my garden carrots. I'll let you guys know how that goes.
Is there any blanching or anything that you have to do?
No, so I just rinse them off and then I cut them up. So I'm primarily using my frozen carrots for like roasts and soups like this because they already kind of get a little bit more, soggy or moist, and then they kind of break down. So it doesn't really matter if when they thaw, they get a little soggy. So that's what I'm using mine in. If you want yours kind of crunchy still, I would not encourage you to freeze them because once they do thaw, they just they're kind of bendy and they're just not quite as good. So, all right, everyone. So this is the best part. This is what I love about this soup. We'll do that in the next step, but I'm finally finished with this. And then the best part about this soup is you're gonna add everything in at the same time and then you let it simmer. So it's super easy. You cut your vegetables, you have your broth ready, and then you throw it all together. But before we do that, we do have to take all of the bones out of our broth. So this is kind of an involved process. So you might have a few chunks still left in there, and that is perfectly okay to have in there. Just make sure you're not leaving any bones in there. That's not something that we want in our soup. So I'm just using a slotted spoon today and going to go ahead and take all of these bones out. So this will just take me a few minutes. Sorry, guys.
Okay, yeah, this is a moment I'll be able to talk a little bit about some soups. So, soups are really simple. And I mean, it sounds more complex, especially when you taste it. You have all of those beautiful flavors layered together. It sounds a bit more complex, but you can really turn leftovers into soup, frozen, or, whatever kind of leftovers you have. You can turn them into soup any day, really. So I just want to give you guys kind of a cheat sheet for how you can create a soup and a simple way you can create them. First, you want to work with your protein. Now, your protein can be something like a meat, so like maybe a beef shoulder, round, or brisket. You could do chicken or turkey legs or thighs. You can do pork. That can be a shoulder or something like that. You could also do beans, whether they're cooked. Beans or lentils also would work well too. That can be your protein source. And I also want to throw in really quickly tofu. Although if you are going to be using tofu, you just want to be careful about how long you're cooking that because it can kind of break apart, especially in a soup. Maybe try doing a saute on that before popping it in your soup so it can firm up a little bit and help it maintain its shape a little better. But tofu absorbs the flavor of whatever it's in. So that's a great thing with that. After your protein, you want to work on your vegetables. So 2 cups of vegetables chopped. You can do something like onions, greens like spinach, kale, collards, chard. All of those would work fine. Celery, zucchini, tomatoes, carrots, mushrooms, broccoli, all of those things work well. And it's really up to you. You can kind of create your own soup, decide what direction you want to take that in. after we get our vegetables, you do want to have your liquid. You're going to need 4 cups of liquid. That can be water, just as simple as water, or a low sodium stock or broth that will work fine as well. And then finally, you're going to want to add your whole grains. So you can do something like brown rice, whole wheat pasta, barley, or quinoa. You're going to want 1.5 cups of that. And with these ideas in mind, you can really create any kind of soups. I mean, sometimes we get kind of stuck in that rut of, chicken noodle, minestrone, maybe tomato basil, but you can kind of change your soup depending on what you have in your kitchen. And it's really as simple as these 4 basic categories. As long as you have those ingredients, some from each column, you're ready to make some soup. So I do see that Jordan has finished grabbing the bones out of her soup here, or out of her broth there. So I'm going to let her go ahead and take over so we can find out what's happening next.
Yeah, so I finally got all of those bones out. There's nothing worse than finding a chicken bone in your chicken noodle soup or bone. It's just really not appetizing. So I try to be really thorough with it. So those are all out. I did remove the meat from here. You can leave the meat in because we are adding, so this is some of the chicken that I was telling you about that I roasted prior. So this is cooked already. So save a little bit of that turkey. We're gonna dice this up and throw this in as well as our vegetables and then our seasonings and our noodles. And then we just let it simmer and it's as simple as that. So I will quickly dice this up. If you have raw, if you're gonna be doing like a raw chicken, make sure you cook it first. I would probably cook it first.
I would too. You just don't want to take any chances there. And that's one way you can still temp your meat, have that safety and security that your food is up to standard.
Yeah.
Safe standards.
Absolutely.
Jordan already kind of talked about this, but I did want to touch a little bit on some of the seasonings that she did use. That's one way that you can really elevate your soup. We like to promote seasoning with herbs and spices and not just with sodium. So I know salt gets kind of a bad rep. It does add a lot to your food and can really help bring out some of those flavors, but really try to add some herbs and spices, and build flavors in that way. That way you can kind of control how much sodium you're having. So for a soup of this kind, pepper, garlic would be great. Thyme, parsley, depending on the soup you're doing, maybe some cumin would be nice. Peppers, ginger, all those things work well in soups. You just kind of have to decide what flavor profile you want to go with.
Yeah. All right, so we've got all of our chicken cut up. The recipe calls for 2 cups. I'm thinking this is a little more than 2 cups, but I'm going to add it all anyway because I like a lot of chicken in my chicken noodle.
Sure.
So we go ahead, our broth is finally clear, our chicken is already cut, and you will notice that I cut my vegetables first and then I cut my chicken.
Yeah.
And I kept my chicken in the fridge for as long as possible. So this is a little cold, but it will warm up once we heat it in our soup here. It's just always good to be in the habit of separating your vegetables from your chicken. I understand today we are going to be cooking them together, but if you were working with a raw chicken and maybe you were having a side salad with your chicken and somehow got chicken juice in your salad, you can get sick that way. So it's really important to always keep them separate. So it's good to be in the habit of that. So I'm going to go ahead and add my seasonings. Today we're going to be adding 1 bay leaf, a half a teaspoon of rosemary, half a teaspoon of pepper, half a teaspoon of thyme, and then a full teaspoon of salt. So I kind of cut back on the salt a little bit. As Sajwa was saying, we're seasoning with other things today, so we don't need a whole lot of salt, but it still does add flavor. So we're going to add a little bit today. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this all in. You can add other seasonings as well. I definitely would add probably garlic powder and onion powder as well. And then we're going to go ahead and add all these beautiful vegetables.
But your house smells so nice.
Yes, so we're in soup season now, so making a lot of soups lately. All right, and then we are going to be using some egg noodles today. Yeah. So I don't usually work with these a whole lot, but this is a good choice for chicken noodle soup, so we're going to go ahead and add this in. Sometimes I try to find, I try to find whole wheat options first, because they tend to be a little bit healthier and got a little more fiber. I have not seen any type of products with whole wheat for egg noodles, so but that's all right. We're going to use these today. And we are going to throw the full 12 ounces in.
Okay.
So this was a 12-ounce bag. Make sure you check your bags if you are doing that. Usually they'll say ounces down below here. So I have 12 ounces that I've thrown in. And finally our chicken. We'll just throw everything in there. All right.
Jordan, is there any way you can adjust your camera a little bit? There we go. You can kind of see throw things
Up
in.
there.
We believe you were doing it, but
yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and stir this all in. And then just go ahead, and these noodles will cook down, and you'll have a little more room. So like right now, it is kind of bunching out the top right now, so you can see that it's not really covered in water too much, but as soon as those noodles start boiling down and start getting softer, they'll start going into your broth a little bit more. You may have to add a little bit more broth if you realize that your soup's kind of just turning into more of a casserole than a soup. So we'll just go ahead and let this cook down, and it says for about 12 minutes that we'll let this cook. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my lid on and then turn up the heat, and we're just going to let this simmer a little while.
Alrighty.
Then we just let it simmer and it's ready.
So while that simmers, I do want to do a little bit more nutrition on there. So we talked about some quick and easy ways that you can make soups at your home, kind of with whatever is in your kitchen, whatever you've got on hand. But I also wanted to cover a little bit on the vegetables that we're having today. Soups are a real wonderful way to incorporate more vegetables into your diet. And as you may or may not know, all forms of vegetables, fruits and vegetables, are great to include in your diet. By that, I mean fresh, frozen, and canned. And I know Jordan kind of talked a little bit about that as well, how she incorporates her frozen carrots. Any kind of frozen vegetable that you might get from your grocery store would be nice. And then canned options, those would be great options to include into the soup as well. Just make sure that you are rinsing those to rinse off some of the extra sodium and the preservatives that might be in there. Or if you can, try to use a low sodium option. So when it comes to vegetables, again, here are a couple of ways that you can incorporate vegetables in your diet elsewhere aside from soups. Raw, just, munching on a carrot and celery, whatever vegetables you enjoy, you can include them into your diet raw. That's always wonderful. And it's easy. So, I really like that option. Steaming your vegetables. Now, with today's soup, we put the vegetables in and we went ahead and we're letting that, boil all together with all the ingredients. And that's going to be fine for this recipe because the nutrients and the vitamins in those vegetables are going to leach into the broth of the soup. And we are going to be consuming that broth. Now, if you're just boiling your vegetables, you don't usually drink the vegetable water, do you? I mean, if you do, you do. More power to you. But most people don't drink the vegetable water. So boiling isn't really the best way to cook your vegetables because, again, those vitamins, those minerals, they're going to be leaching into that water, and you're not getting the most out of that. So we do recommend steaming. I also really love roasting. That's a great way to get some vegetables cooked. If you do that with the meat, maybe some chicken or something, and you get a nice caramelized flavor with that. So yummy. Stir frying. Jordan already kind of alluded to how she uses her vegetables in a stir fry. That's a great way to throw in a bunch of vegetables that you might need to get rid of. Maybe they're on their way out. Maybe they're frozen. You can pop them into a stir fry, quick and easy. And we've done that recipe before with Cooking Connected. So check that out on YouTube. And then finally, I'd like to mention grilled. That's really great for the summertime. You're already out there grilling your meat. go ahead and save some space on the grill for your vegetables as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our daily My Plate recommendations for vegetables specifically. So here's my My Plate, just in case you guys aren't familiar with that. And this is a really great model to follow, especially when you're trying to eat healthy, trying to make sure that you're getting all the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, protein, and dairy into your diet. Following this model is really going to be helpful because, it's hard when we're going about our everyday to remember the exact quantity. So we have half of our plate being fruits and vegetables here. Let's focus on our vegetables. Um, for children, ages like 2 to 3, about 1 cup is good. With your My Plate. For girls, as we get a little bit early or get a little bit older, 1.5 cups. So you have that half cup increase as the age increases. Going to girls 9 to 13, 2 cups. Girls 14 to 18, 2.5 cups. Again, we're seeing that half cup increase. Now let's talk about the fellas. As children between the ages of 2 to 3, that 1 cup again. Between the ages of 4 to 8, 1.5 cups, that half cup increase there. Boys 9 to 13, 2.5 cups. So we see another half cup increase. Then boys 14 to 18, we're looking at 3 cups. For women, ages 19 through 50, 2.5 cups. Women who are 51 and older, try to get 2 cups into your diet. For men 19 to 50, 3 cups. And men 50, 51 and older, 2.5 cups. So just try to keep that in mind. Hopefully you're able to catch your age group and kind of figure out how much of these veggies you need to be including. But really try to incorporate them. There are so many ways to include them. Again, in your main dishes, omelets, sandwiches, pasta, stir fry, those pizzas that we all love to eat. Don't be afraid to put some veggies in there and get that into your diet that way. In the summertime in Minnesota, when we have all of those fresh vegetables at the farmers market and locally available at the grocery stores, try to include those in salads, wraps, that kind of thing. There are lots of great ways to get your vegetables in and to make sure that you're making your My Plate look like this plate. There you go. How's
Uh,
that soup coming, Jordan?
oh, it's coming along. So, looking at our My Plate that Saja was talking about, thinking about our chicken noodle soup today, we do have our protein, which is chicken. We have tons of vegetables, or carrots, or celery, or onions, and then we do have some grains. They are refined grains today because we are working with the egg noodle, but there are still grains, so we've got that. So we are just missing our fruits and our dairy. We can easily incorporate, a side or an apple
Mhm.
or and a glass of milk to kind of round everything out. But I did want to mention, since I have been cooking my broth a little bit longer, I may have lost some of the broth just in the cooking process. So it might be a little bit less. So you may notice that if you're cooking your broth a little bit longer with those chicken bones, so for instance, an hour as opposed to the half hour that they recommend, you may have lost a little broth. So it's starting to cook down, but I do have my vegetable broth on hand. This is what I had on hand. If you have another type of broth on hand that you want to throw in there, you can definitely use this. So I may have to use this in a few minutes if it's not cooking down. I'm obviously ready to go with my bowl here. It is smelling good over here. So let's go ahead and take a look and see where we're at. Oh yeah.
Looks like one of our viewers got back to us. We threw this question out there about some of your favorite seasonings that you like to add to soups. And we've got one saying savory is a good one to add. I personally agree. That would be great, especially for a chicken noodle one like this. That would be great.
All right, so it is coming together quite nicely, a lot better than I thought it was going to. I was worried I didn't have enough broth in there. But it has cooked down quite a bit, like I said. So it is starting to look a lot more like a chicken noodle soup. My noodles are still a little bit dense, so this will cook down for probably 12 minutes. But then our soup is ready. And keeping in mind those vegetables will release a little bit of moisture. Celery naturally has a lot of moisture in it. So that's probably where some of my moisture is coming from as well. So we'll just let that cook down and then your soup is ready to go. So get your bowls ready and you are ready to go, just like I am. So that is our chicken noodle soup, or turkey noodle if you're working with turkey today. So
So like every time we have an episode of Cooking Connected, we will be posting pictures of the soup, the final product, in the comments below. So just stay tuned for that. Just from the sneak peek you gave us, wow, it looks incredible. So man, I wish I could have a bowl. That sounds just right.
yes, it's kind of a cold day, so we're
Yeah.
looking forward to soup. So hopefully you all can make some type of soup in the near future. This is a really easy one, a really easy to menu plan too. So
Mhm.
it's nice if you can buy that whole chicken, which is naturally a little bit cheaper. Make roasted chicken or whatever you want out of it, and then use that for a chicken noodle soup. So you kind of have that plan for the next day. So
Yeah, that rocks. All right, you guys. So you know what time it is. We've just completed our recipe. We're gonna go ahead and give you the program code for our survey today. For this week's episode of Cooking Connected, the turkey soup or chicken noodle soup, whichever you have on hand, they work interchangeably. That's the beautiful thing. Our program code is E098561. And again, that is our program code for this week's episode of Cooking Connected.
awesome. Thank you, everyone. You have a great day.
Bye, everyone.